All right, juniors, I'm going to switch over real quick to, you're going to stay on the video with me, but I'm going to flip over to the poems, okay? So hopefully you're looking at this with me. We're on our that same thing that you had yesterday that had external poems on it. We're going to look at the First Snowfall, which is the middle poem by James Russell Lowell, who's the fourth of our fireside poets we studied. So this is the shortest of the three external poems we're going to look at, and then we've got a pretty big one that is it's a newer poem for me, so I'm going to still kind of struggle with it a little bit, but I want to do it next. So I may do it in a separate video though, okay? So let's talk about the First Snowfall. All right, this one's very simple. You've got an A, B, C, B rhyme scheme, okay? What that means is the second and fourth rhymes are going to rhyme. The first and third do not. So it's kind of an awkward rhyme scheme, but it helps rhythmically. It helps really well that the way this is set up, and then the rhyme scheme just adds a little more to make it kind of a memorable thing. So again, a lot of these poems were made for memorization and to kind of teach people about how poetry works. So I like this. This was depressing though, so get ready. First stanza. The snow had begun in the gloaming, and busily all the night had been heaping field and highway with the silence deep and white. I mean, this first one's just, and there's a lot of nature imagery in here, and it's really dark and cold imagery, which are things I absolutely love. I think I'm in the minority on that, but I love them. So he has this image of the title's the first snowfall. So snow is just beginning and it has been snowing all night. And so as this man is getting up, or the speaker, I'm assuming it's a guy, gets up and looks out the next morning, he sees everything covered in white. It says, every pine and fir and hemlock wore ermine too dear for an earl, and the poorest twig on the elm tree was ridged inch deep with pearl. So pearl and ermine are both going to be, ermine is like a claw, like a fur, I think. So, you look at, we don't see it very often down here in the South, but if you were to look at, trees in the North when there's a lot of snow, it kind of almost looks fuzzy. And then, of course, the imagery of colors with pearl and things like that. So, it's not just been a little snow, it's covered. It says, from shed's new roof with Carrara came Chanticleer's muffled crow. The stiff rails were softened to swan's down and still fluttered down the snow. So even these hard things like the roof and the railway ties, even they are almost softened with, it looks like, with the snow. So again, it's a very soft, very, white imagery here. I stood and watched by the window the noiseless work of the sky and the sudden flurries of snowbirds like brown leaves whirling by. Okay, again, he's just in there watching as the snow comes down and the leaves are being turned, which I find these types of scenes to be beyond gorgeous. Man, my wife does not agree, though, let me tell you. So I thought of a mound in sweet Auburn where a little headstone stood, how the flakes were folding it gently, as did robins the babes in the wood. Now, this isn't Auburn in Alabama. He's talking about Auburn in somewhere in the Northeast. There's lots of cities named Auburn. But he's thinking about, and when he says a mound, it's like something that's been, and not to spoil things, but a burial area. And he thinks about how, where we know it's a burial because there's a headstone. Who am I kidding? All right. And he talks about how he's thinking of this place that's also being covered by the snow. He says, up spoke our little Mabel, saying, Father, who makes it snow? And I told of the good All-Father who cares for us here below. So one of his children asks about who's been buried there. And he mentions that it's their daughter, or I'm sorry, let me back up. Somebody's at my door and it threw me off. He says, up spoke our little Mabel. One of their children is asking him about who makes it snow, something a little kid would typically ask. All right. And she says that he tells her that it's God. God makes it snow. And he tells about how God cares about the people there below. So it says, then he says, again, I looked at the snowfall and thought of the leaden sky that arched o'er our first great sorrow when that mound was heaped so high. Now, again, if you're wondering who the burial mound was for, he says, again, he's thinking about that same spot, and he remembers the day that whoever was buried here, and it was snowing that day too. He says, I remember the gradual patience that fell from that cloud-like snow, flake by flake healing and hiding the scar of our deep plunged woe. And now he's going to compare the falling of snow to time's passage. Snow falls slowly. It doesn't move at all quickly. And he says time's the same way, especially when you're trying to get over a great sorrow. When something bad has happened to you, you don't get over it the next day. It takes a long time. He's pointing that out. And the idea of a scar of our deep plunge woe indicating the snow covers it. It doesn't make it disappear. Same thing with time. Time may cover up your pain, but it's still there underneath. He says, and again to the child I whispered, the snow that husheth all, darling, the merciful Father alone can make it fall. So it's like at this point, the kid's already asked, hey, who makes the snow? He answered that question, and then out of the blue, he continues an answer that she didn't ask for. Now, this part's for him, really. And he points out again that the snow that husheth all, he says, and again, the point there is that the snow covers everything and makes it look white and clean and new for that little brief time. But he's also talking about how it covers up, things like scars or these tombstones, which you don't really know as it's covered with snow what actually is there. And he's like, that's all we can hope for in our lives, is for time to pass and to cover up sorrow that's just isn't ever going to disappear. Because really what he's dealing with is in this last stanza, and you'll really get this. He says, then with eyes that saw not, I kissed her, and she kissing back could not know that my kiss was given to her sister, folded close under deepening snow. So he kisses his daughter, like telling her he loves her, but it's really intended for his child who's buried at this mound in Auburn that he's talking about. So what he's doing is he's thinking about, the pain of losing a child and how like snow might cover up. Like think about if you have, like if there's a junkyard and if it snows a lot, it covers it over and it makes like the junk disappear briefly. Everything looks the same. It's just this brand new coating of white. And he's like, that's the same thing with the passage of time when you miss something, when something bad has happened to you. And time covers it, but it never makes it go away. Just like with that snow underneath it, there's still everything, all the junk is still there. It's just covered over briefly with the snow. And so he's thinking of that in the same way of how he feels about this girl. It happened a while back, and you never totally get over it. I can only imagine. I've never lost a child, and hopefully that's not something I'll ever have to go through. But I can only imagine how once that happens, yes, time makes it easier to face the day because, God provides ways for us to get by. But getting over it's never an issue. Yes, you get over your, high school breakup. And, even when it's something as simple as, not simple, even if it's something as bad as, the death of a parent or a friend, it's something that you can kind of, you don't ever get over it, but you can get past it. But I can only imagine how getting over the death of a child is pretty much impossible. And that's what this whole thing's about. Now, if you'll notice, there's no big depth to this. It's about imagery with the snow and how, and the comparison of snow and time, and also how, snow covers up a lot of stuff, just like time can cover wounds, but they never really truly go away. And eventually, they come back. And that's something that you always constantly have to deal with. It provokes some sympathy for this writer who you feel really sorry for. At least I do. Again, as a parent, I can only imagine how bad he feels. Okay. All right, well, guys, normally at this point, honestly, this has only been like 7 minutes. So maybe I would go on and do, if they're a combined two works, but Burning Driftwood is a pretty complex poem, and I don't want to just try to tack it on with this. So I'm going to end this and come back and do that poem. I have read this poem before a long time ago. I remembered it, and I enjoy it, but going back through it and studying it for teaching it is different than just reading it for enjoyment. So it is got some difficult parts. So we're probably need a little more time with it. And I don't want to make this video 30 minutes. Excuse me, my last video I was making, I bit my tongue, and I'm not quite past that. So I'm going to stop here and come right back after school and film the one about Burning Driftwood, which I absolutely love. The little bit I'm pulling out of it, I really love. The more I go back to it time after time, I really enjoy this poem. I'm hoping you guys will too. So anyway, thank you for your time on this one. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully, you got it in class, but if you didn't, there's a little bit more for you. All right. All right, guys. Well, we will see you again in just a few minutes.